This is part two. I want to continue this painting because I feel that even though it was an overcast day, I've been looking at all of my photos from that day and there were no strong shadows. I feel that it can benefit from some changes. So we have titanium white, yellow ochre, permanent alizarin crimson, the phthalocyanine or phthalo green, and ultramarine blue. And I have made several mixes in here of different colors of grays. Remember, or maybe if you haven't seen the previous video or any one of my other videos, I use a palette that's a grayscale palette. So it basically is around the 40 or 50% of in the grayscale. So the good thing about this palette is that it is actually giving me the idea that these grays I've made, they're not really very light and they're not very dark. So I can go either way with them. The darkest combination I have, this kind of purple color, which I made mixing all three with a little bit of white. And then I have this kind of salmon color, which is a color that I found on the earthy space. And I am definitely going to be needing or adding, oh, I'm sorry, I just knocked the camera. Sorry about that. A lot more of the yellow ochre for accents of light. So I did forget to add more yellow ochre to how I left it yesterday when I taped part one. So if you haven't seen it and you're interested to know how I got to this level of painting, feel free to join and watch it. So I'm going to be making more mixes in here, but I think we should just begin with this very salmony, or it's a color that's very neutral, and I want to use it for areas in shade, but where they're not completely obliterated from light. So just make sort of a statement here of this sort of color. And then I want to add a little bit of the reddish color to that. But I need to bring it to more or less the same value. These are the same value as my palette. And maybe not that rosy. Sometimes this is one thing that's you can see in many professional painters and painters that you might like a lot, like Monet or other impressionists, that they use same value but different colors. And by mixing them this way, it adds interest in your subject, but you don't need to define exactly what it is. And there's not that difference in the sense of the shininess or brightness, what we call the value, but it's just by adding different colors it helps. And I definitely want to make a statement or mark a little bit in the back there, but I want to make it more greenish. So if you realize I made some sort of a green, and I'm mixing that green with the rose color that I had before. I just, I did not see that many green areas originally. This tree was covering them, but I just don't think it works well for this particular painting. So I like to try this for sort of color variation and carving out that back of the area here in this bank where the bridge starts. And even though this foliage was not allowing me to see that much, I think it will add a little bit more interest in this image. So now I just wipe a little bit this brush from all of that color there, because I want to add with the same brush, and I'm just wiping, but with the same brush, I'm just going to add straight yellow ochre. If you are using cadmium colors, your painting is definitely going to be sort of more shiny. I like to use these more muted colors, but it's really up to you. I like to use a simplified palette of colors because that allows me to get harmony in the painting. You don't see a bright color in one end that's lacking in the other. And on the other hand, when you travel, it is actually easier just to have these. And you learn a lot about color mixing. But if you have 20 different colors, you can just choose the ones that you like. So you saw what I did. I put the warmer color in there. They're really very similar in value. So what did I do? I used the purplish gray that I had. I added some pinkish color and then green and yellow. And with that, I think this bank now is a little bit more interesting than what was before. And definitely sort of the lighter or shinier area should be where the tree is not there. So maybe I can add a little bit more of shadow here when we get there. Normally, we work from dark to light because the darks are transparent and you can never recover transparency once you add an opaque color. But the beauty of both acrylic and oils is that you can paint light on top of dark and dark on top of light. You do miss some of the transparency. For instance, here, when I use the white canvas and very light colors, I think that brightness comes through better than if I had painted it on top of a dark. And this dark is actually very strong, and I think it would not be as strong if I had painted on top. But you can do it. You can paint on top. So I want to go now. I mean, I don't have actually, I just looked at my painting and I thought maybe I should make an effort to tape how I finish it. So I'm just looking at it and saying, I think it does need the statement of this bank here. And maybe I need to go even lighter. So some of these areas probably, there was no bright light, but definitely if you look at the tree, I mean, the tree should really be creating more shadows under the tree, but where there's no tree, there shouldn't be that many shadows. So what did I do? I just added white to that color. And because I'm working Alla Prima, I made the painting yesterday and it was not completely dried. So it's still tacky and it's still allowing me to paint on top. You can see tiny brush strokes, but I'm still using a rather large brush. So what I did was to put lighter in the back. Usually things that recede in the back should be lighter. And because I use that green, let's just try to make that green also lighter. So I'm using a different area of my palette here for mixing. And this is allowing me to see this is lighter than the palette I have, which is similar to that. And maybe when I just go here in the back, that's what I said I was going to do the back, right? So I should just add a little bit of that green in the back. It's not bad to add it here. It just adds visual interest. Now, there's another thing that I noticed is that the bank here really starts here because that's where the bridge goes. And there was a dark area here, but then there's some lights in here. So I need to sort of recreate a little bit of that color that I had there. I am not yet cleaning the brush. I'm just going to be using some of this red or pink mixed with that and see what happens. I mean, sometimes you just have to try to see how the color mixes go and learn a bit on color theory. It's practice, basically. So I'm going to make this bank sort of go a little bit more on the horizontal, because this is definitely something that was catching my eye. It looked like the bridge went under the water. So now I think that worked fine. It's a color that's here, so it's good to add it here. Brings harmony, as I usually say, and perhaps in here a little bit too. As you see, I don't have a formula, and I think, you know, it's just how you are the painter, so you decide where you want to put things. Now I'm going to wipe it just slightly, and I am going to get a little bit more of that yellow, but I'm putting it in the area where I had a little bit of white. So it's not completely the yellow ochre, but I just want to bring some of these accents that maybe help visually to identify that this is the edge where the light is shining. I just knocked my lamp. Where the light is shining here, and this is a reflection in the water of that area. Okay. In terms of the reflection, I think that we need to use a little bit of that green that I had made and I put in here. I think it may benefit from having a little bit of green in this reflection. This reflection was really dark in my photograph, so this is what's making me see this. Is it visually it was not reading very correct, I think. I mean, I may be making a mistake, but this is a painting, and you just decide how you want to paint it. So in here, I am suggesting that the negative painting I did here with the blue is also being made here, but now with this reflection of the water. So you can see this greenish mixture reflection of the water. If you are painting with acrylics and you want to give it a try to either this painting or a similar one, you may find it difficult because you're not going to be able to mix the colors the way that they are being mixed here, because this is oils. All right, so now I do want to get to that wall. I may be very stubborn in trying to do that now, but it's a dirty light color. So if you see, I used the same mix I had, which had a little bit of the green, the red, the pink, and the yellow. Oops. Okay, no problem. One of my settings just fell. I just think this is a bit distracting for you. So I've just placed a cardboard here, and it didn't want to stay. But I just didn't want you to be very distracted with that. Anyway, hopefully nothing happened because, or fortunately nothing happened because I used water-soluble oils and it just knocked some of my water containers on the surface. So it's water, no problem. Anyway, I think this is going to be still too dark for what I want. And I think this requires, I mean, it does look white, interestingly, but as you saw, it's really not white. But I think this area here does need to have some accents of the light on the bank. And just for harmony, I'm just gonna make, again, you know, the back area should be slightly more whitish, pushes things back. Contrast brings things closer. And I think that's probably reading better. And for that reflection, I don't want to use that bright. So what I'm going to do is just wipe slightly, and maybe the reflection could be a little bit more orangey. So let's try to make that color with what I had here, which was sort of a purple, so it does have red and more yellow. Let's see how that reflection could. Yes, I think that reflection is going to work better than just all dark. And evidently, I don't want to put the same white I put in there because reflections in water are always darker than what they reflect. Reflections go down, and then the impression of water is dab, 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 horizontal. I think that is improving this area of the painting. I think yesterday I was probably a bit tired. I'm having a very bad cold with a headache. And this is allowing me not to think about my symptoms, distracting me. And I think I have low-grade fever, so I can always use that as an excuse for why the painting did not work out very well. I do believe this now reads better. Now the bridge goes behind that, so maybe I can even add a little bit of a note in there. Could be lighter, that something there. It's hanging. And, you know, if you make statements or brushstrokes, whatever you want to call them, that are too notable where you wanted it to be blurred, you can always blur it. So I think now it reads better. There's something coming out in front of that bridge, but the bridge now is going into the land. It seemed before that it was going into some sort of the water. And I was like, oh, yeah, even though I did like some of those impressions, it didn't read very well. Okay, I'm just using dirty, lighter color here for that reflection. If I put that there, the reflection should be reading correctly. And I don't want to take away all the dark because that brings that light area in the painting, which is the lightest light. One thing I want you to notice is when I painted the water yesterday, I did not cover all the canvas. It was really not on purpose. I was planning to, but I like the way that we have the lightest light is the white of the canvas. And you don't need to fill out the canvas all the time. Okay, I think overall this has improved. Now we can see a tree. And I just want to add with the same sort of light yellowish color, I just want to add some edge here, and it could go lighter on the bridge because it didn't actually show that, you know, the light comes from the top. Even if it's an overcast day, the top should have some light in there. And of course the bottom is darker. So I think that now brings the idea of shape a bit better. And I don't want to get rid of that nice color that we had for the bridge. So now the bridge has some light on top, the shadow in the bottom, and the reflection. And I like the way that I broke down the reflection. It may not be very natural, but I do like it. So now I want to use this kind of dark. So I'm going to change brushes. This is the brush that I've been using for the lights, and I think I'm going to use it again. And I'm grabbing exactly the same size and the same type of brush. It's a flat and it's synthetic. So I've mentioned in other YouTube videos that I have that synthetic brushes are very good for all the water-soluble media. So water-soluble oils, they are oils, but you have the advantage that you just need to clean the brushes or use the solvent is water. And they are non-toxic. So for many reasons, I do like the water-soluble media like acrylics and oils. And you need to use synthetics. If you do use a synthetic but that mimics the hog or hog brushes, problem is that the water opens them up. So when you wash them with water, they don't keep the chiseled edge. And that's the reason why it's better to use synthetics. I did explain this in another video. So I like this kind of dark purple color that I have, and I'm gonna be a bit daring here, but I think this tree trunk needed to be a bit re-established. And I'm just boldly going to make a bit more dark under the canopy. Because yesterday I used very thick paint, you can see that it is actually mixing with what I had before. So having made this so dark doesn't really matter that much because it is mixing with what I had before. And I want to establish a bit of dark. Now this is getting too muddy. So what I need to do is to get a bit more of cleaner, let's see if I can do this, cleaner color of that purple in my brush, and just is sort of touch and go so that it doesn't mix that much. However, what I want to do is to create sort of a base that's darker so that when I come back with a light color, it looks better. There is another option which I am very tempted to do, which is just to scrape the paint because it was very thick and re-establish that tree. So when we do this, or when I do this, I frequently save this color for color harmony. Now I do like that area there. It doesn't have a lot of bright contrast, but it has the contrast of yellow and blue. And I sort of like that. So it's up to you. If in your painting you prefer to not use that, that's fine. So now I get here a mix that's a purplish color that had the yellow. What do I need to do to that? Maybe sometimes having this sort of neutral colors is very helpful for accents and etc. But what I'm going to do, I want to reestablish a bit of the dark in there. And the purple you can make with blue and red, like I'm showing you now. But with this kind of palette that I use, which is including the Phthalocyanine green, which is a blue biased green, you can also use the green and the red to make a purple. And my feeling here is if I make it biased to the blue, it's going to push this a bit farther. And I don't want it to compete with the red of this. So I think in order to see the bias better, it's always good to add a little bit. See, this is very biased to the blue. So I think I need to add more red. And that's the way that, you know, with color mixing, if you're just, you know, entertained by watching this, you sometimes might feel in a particular video that it's too much time mixing colors, and some people don't show you how to mix colors, but it's part of the pleasure of painting. So if you are an amateur painter, you will start seeing how you really enjoy mixing colors. So I'm getting a little bit darker in the bottom. And yeah, this is a color that I think it's gonna work well as the shadow of that canopy of the tree. And that tree was a willow tree. So it's a springtime, and it's a tree that was already getting some leaves, not too many yet. Okay. So now what do we need to do? I think that closer to the tree, we need to establish some darker areas, because even though there was not much light, it doesn't make sense that under the tree it would be light. So I'm just mixing, not too dark, but I'm just using the darker area there, and I will be just establishing a little bit of shadow under that tree. And of course we had the green of the back, very nondescript. So one thing we can do is just come back a little bit with a little bit lighter areas in the back that would probably explain this tree is producing some shade under it, but in the back we have a lighter area, or an area with no trees that's getting a little bit more light. And if you see, I did it more with white, because white pushes things back rather than yellow. Okay, I think it's coming along better, and it's just a matter of getting a little bit better explanation of what this is. Now in the very back, I had put yellow, and I think it should be more muted. So we can use this color, but it should be lighter, because if we want to match something like that, it is definitely lighter. So I'm just using the mixes I had here, and let's hope that I can get, yeah, it does something that's not very descript, but that can help us define, and maybe a little bit, a tiny bit of blue. I think that adding that, it's almost lost in the palette, if you see there, because of the palette color. But if I add some areas in here of that kind of bluish color, I think it just helps at least understand there's something in the back, but not too yellow, because yellow brings things forward. And I do want the yellow to be the tree and not the back. And it was very confusing. Actually, when I took the photo, I had to sort of make it a bit larger, because I couldn't even understand what I was seeing. And in here in the back is just sort of foliage and part of that other back end trees and stuff. So what I'm going to try to do is just make, some notes. I just brought the dark here, and I shouldn't, because I was trying to just say this is part of this foliage in here. And I think that instead of making it rosy, I think it's better to have it in that sort of a bluer color. I'm stepping back, and I'm seeing that it is working better, but I just don't want this to have too many brush strokes, because it's the back. So I want it to be more like blurred. But still, I think we needed to have some difference in here. So the bridge comes over to a path, and this is an island sort of closer to us. I don't know if it's reading correctly, but that's why we have this area here and here. So maybe I just need to sort of mark a little bit that this area here is coming here in the back. And the other area is where the bridge was. Okay, I think I'm going to use a little bit of this greenish color. Yeah, it's getting a bit lost in there. So what can I do? Okay, yeah, I think this might work well, either if it's the reading like a end of the bridge, a wall or something. But now I think this reads better as sort of a small island where this tree is, and the bridge definitely reaches now over to an area of land, not in the water. And I think the tree, by making this darker, now we can put just a little bit of yellow. And I think I'm just gonna use, so it's the other brush, I just changed brushes. This is the one I was using before for yellow. And I think I'm just going to use the actual yellow ochre directly. Here and here. So I have to be very careful because I just added the purple and I don't want them to mix. So if you're painting acrylics, you have no problem. You can just do it directly because most likely your acrylic color is already dried and you won't get mixed colors. But in oils, we do have to be careful when we do Alla Prima of not brushing and brushing again. So if you can see how I'm doing it, I'm just placing paint, very thick paint on top and just lifting the brush. Okay, I think that reads better. Maybe just adding a bit more here. I don't want to have too much bright area in the edges of the painting. I think this reads better. Maybe there's an area here where we could play a little bit with light, but not as light as I want it in this area. And I guess I think this has improved. I hope you liked watching me, how I am changing some of these colors. Now, one other thing I want to do, I'm going to switch to the brush where I was using the darker colors, and I am going to use now the combination of red and green. So this phthalocyanine green and red make a very deep and interesting purple. And I'm just going to brush it here. It looks more green than purple because it's placed against the red. And red and green are opposite colors. And I thought this area in the front, interestingly, was looking very flat, and it's not my intention to make all of these brush strokes very descriptive, but I think it needed a bit of ground color here to establish this a little bit more. And some of this was the original wash. If you watch the first part, you will see that I did not use my very well tested and established way of just making a dark wash for everything. I just used the Alizarin Crimson, which I like. And in this area, I just left it a little bit too boring. So now I am going to use the Alizarin Crimson and a little bit of yellow. This makes a brighter red. So it's Alizarin Crimson, which is very violety, but with the yellow ochre, it just makes a super interesting red. I think. I mean, if you have cadmium red, you might want to use it for your accents, but if you're using a limited palette, like I do, this is the way that you can get a brighter red with adding a bit of yellow. If you add white, you get pink, you don't get red. But you knew that. And I'm just brushing it here and there, especially where you add the darks, then you add some of this color, which is not light. I mean, if you compare to the lightest areas, not light, but I think now the whole painting reads better. So I hope you liked the way that I did attempt at finishing this painting, and that you subscribe and watch other videos in my channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I did want to tape the way that I finished it, because oftentimes I don't, and I think it's cheating you of how just a few brush strokes and mixes and watching, especially looking at your painting and saying, what else can I do? What's missing? And sometimes, in my case, that takes a day or two. So just seeing the painting from far away and saying, how can I improve it? I had the plan, the idea, and that's how I did today. So let me stop talking and boring you. Have a wonderful day and check my channel. Thank you very much.